There we go.
There we go. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So guys, listen, welcome to this beautiful conversation we're gonna have. My name is Ahmed Tijani, Mr. Cray to the world. We are joined by Usman Raja. Now, many of you are gonna know that name, and for those of you that don't know that name, you'll definitely know and realize that there are so many things that he's had his hand in and has been a part of that you might not have even realized impacted you in one way or another. So, Usman, listen, so when I knew we were going to do this sit down and we were going to talk, I went and I started doing some research of my own. And one of the first things that popped up was the prize fighter documentary. And it was fascinating to me because I was like, in my life and career, I've come across so many prize fighter guys and prize fighter fighters. I even see David Zoltacek, and I see that you guys were, and I was like, so Usman, you are to blame for the butt whooping I took. You contributed to training that beast over there. So I just wanted to find out from you, like, how did you get started in MMA in general? How did the prize fighters team begin? What was your start?
Well, the start of it is like always into martial arts since we were kids. Yeah, grew up in that like 80s phase where you had like martial arts was like it was about being the good guy, wasn't it? Yeah, Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon, and kickboxer and all that stuff. And me and my brother grew up in a certain way where we grew up with a lot of racism. And I think the one thing that was always there was that martial arts element. 8 years old, we're doing Wado karate, and so there was always that activity going on. But the introduction to like the combat arts was when I moved to Huddersfield, and I started up Thai boxing over there, and trained with Bob and Tony Sykes, and then that got the ball rolling in the stand-up arts. And then
when you moved to Huddersfield, how old were you when you moved over?
It was just between. So I was one of the kids that was always the youngest in the year. Do you see what I mean? So even when I left school, I was still 15, and then turned 16 when I moved to Huddersfield.
Okay.
So we were. It was. But when I moved there, I was rough around the edges, so to speak. Do you see what I mean? It was like it was. I had to run away from the area I was living in before, where I was living with my mum, because I had 2 warrants on me. The group of guys that we were hanging, our group of friends, 2 of them had tried to kill another member of our group. They'd ended up in prison, and it was like things had taken a turn for the worse. So my mum shipped me with my dad to Huddersfield, and that's where the martial arts started over there. And then over the years, as the years went by, moved to Bournemouth for a year. Started training with a guy called Phil Norman. Phil was one of the first. Actually, it's strange because he ended up as one of the first in those early days of MMA as well. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Trained with Phil, and then moved to London, where back into the Thai boxing and boxing over there. And then it was strange because I remember like looking for the groundwork in those early days of the UFC. I'm talking about single-digit UFCs. I can't remember. I mean, when I talk about single digits, I'm talking about like UFC 3-4 type of single digits. And I got a phone call from one of the guys that I knew that was doing door work, and he said to me, "Look, there's a group of us that are getting together in West Hampstead. Do you understand?" Went down there, and lo and behold, that was like the first. That was Alexis, Paul, Marius. Alexis and Paul were like the first Brazilian jiu-jitsu blue belts in the country. So that was like the first.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about before people even know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is.
But do you know what it is to show the time period? The guy that you worked with didn't say to you, "Yeah, listen, come down to this gym and blah blah." He said, "There's a group of us getting together. We're gonna work," almost like he's talking about some underground fight club.
It was invite only. You couldn't come in from outside.
Yeah.
To come and train. It was like you were either invited or you're like, well, you know our reputation. Our reputation's out there from the early days. We weren't. You had to earn your stripes in what we did. Do you see what I mean? So those early days, we're doing the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu over there, and then that's when you start getting the first what were called Vale Tudo shows, or like no holds barred. Night of the Samurai, where you got Lee Hasdale's promoting that thing. Do you see what I mean? And,
I know Lee Hasdale. Yeah, I know Lee.
So that was like the first, like Lee Hasdale's were like the first respectable, like proper shows. But then in between all of that, it's quite messy. Like what I'm talking about is you've got like this, like because we had it back in those days because you didn't have the MMA show, so you had like that challenge match format.
Okay, yeah. So for a lot of people, if you're not familiar with kind of like the challenge format, like if you ever YouTube kind of like the Gracie challenge, like anyone can come into the gym and can try and challenge their style of fighting. No hold barred, no rules. Go in there as long as shoes off, bare knuckle, and you'll see which style fares the best. So that kind of thing was going on. So not just over there, but obviously in the UK as well. That kind of thing was going on as well.
And you remember, like back in those days, like knowing groundwork, it was like you were a superhero. Do you understand what I mean? Like, literally, you could just take guys out with it. Do you understand what I mean? So even like the point that where because what would happen is you'd get like I call them like the wannabe hard men or whatever. Do you understand what I mean? Because everyone everyone back in those days, because people think just because they've got aggression and glycogen in their system that they're going to pull it off. Do you see what I mean?
Oh man, listen, if something happened to me, I would just absolutely lose it and I'd go crazy. And for anyone who trains, you just think to yourself, yeah, man, like good luck with that. Let me know how that goes, bro.
So what ended up happening with that was because in those early days, we had like the groundwork going on at West Hampstead, and then me, Zikix, and Kamal set up at Peacock's gym. So we'd get down there and we'd rep everything together, like the groundwork, the stand-up, the knees, the elbows. And then we ended up getting sponsored by the Bowers brothers up there. And so it was like... I remember seeing that, It was wicked. It's like we had like... it's like the team just got built up of the best. That's not me saying it. It's like literally like the who's who, But the thing was, it was there was like a back wrestling room up there as well. So when we have people that, there's that thing, if you want a contest, come test, ain't it? Do you see what I mean? It's like that. You had those like, you had these people that would come along, and because you were like a fresh face, you got to remember, I was like 58 kg in those days. 58's like, you could just grab a rope and pull yourself up. Do you see what I mean? Just with your hand stop thing. So you just take them into the back wrestling room, and that'd be it. Do you see what I mean? You'd get it. It was interesting because the one thing that used to get messy with that was always takedowns. Do you see what I mean? Especially back in those early days. You get tagged around the top of the head or whatever, and do you know what I mean? But it was seldom the bloody affair that it sounds like. When people hear about it, bare knuckle. It wasn't. There was a couple of times people got schooled. Yeah.
Yeah.
Suleiman picked someone up and slammed them, and they bloody snapped their collarbone. And he had Michael Johnson as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think someone got.
I think for a lot of people, if you're not familiar with the sport, if you don't train, you hear all these things and you have all these ideas. Even the idea of hearing bare knuckles sounds so brutal and barbaric, but people have to remember this is not even about brutality or being a barbaric sport. It's just at that time, things like gloves and those things, like there was no general consensus over which gloves you would use for those things. So therefore, how can you have a universal like equipment for this sport that is in its infancy type of thing? So a lot of the shows are bare knuckle just out of necessity, because what would you put on their hands? Like, what are you putting on gym gloves? Like,
yeah, and that was the thing. I remember like some real dodgy stuff where I'm not going to say the promoter, but he'd obviously like got bad gloves, like cut the ends off them, and then maybe got his wife to sew whatever together. And we're watching that like, how are you supposed to do whatever with this? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
This is like, you saw MMA, like, because it wasn't even called MMA in those days. You saw this like slowly getting like a little bit organized, and then it would get more it would get organized and then disorganized. So it was like up and down with it. And then over time it got to a stage where like you had this scene where you got to remember, we weren't doing this stuff as a hobby, we were full-time. So we're at Peacock's gym as a full-time fight team, training along with the pro fighters, supplementing our money, because the Bowers brothers we're doing for security on the boxing shows for the Bowers brothers, and any bits of work that you can get. Do you see what I mean? So
so how did you guys go from kind of being this unit sponsored by the Bowers brothers, working out of Peacock's gym, to the prize fighter team being created? And even your brother Suleiman kind of taking, like, being one of the main coaches of that team. So how did that come about?
Okay, so what happened was at first we were going to do this thing where I got called up into the office at Peacock. It's quite funny because it's like it's like a scene out of a movie. It's still funny now when I think about it, because I thought I was in trouble for something. And it went up and
sorry, Usman, to cut you off here. This is to tell you what kind of things you were getting yourself into. You thought you were in trouble for something. You didn't know what it was. You were thinking, you started to have to go through what are the things I've done? What have I done that they know about?
So what's going on? And then it was funny because went up and Tony's sitting there behind the desk with a cigar, and he started telling me about at that time they'd sorted out a partnership with Showtime in Holland.
Okay.
This is before UFC 38 and all of that.
Yeah.
So there was going to be this thing where they were going to hold what MMA shows on the Thames on a barge. So all of this stuff was getting organised. That's the first time I met Mike from Mike's gym, and Mike's over with Valentine, Overheem, and all of these lot. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it was an exciting time, and then all of a sudden, the Bowers brothers got arrested for the. I can't remember whether, I think it was the Heathrow robbery they got arrested for. I think, wasn't it? They got arrested for the Heathrow robbery, and then what happens is when they get put in prison, it's like you get some people come in to manage Peacocks, and they're looking to get rid of what they thought was the gangster element.
Okay.
So because of that, we're the first ones that we were the ones that got targeted with that.
Okay.
They were like even now it's like there's nonsense up on the internet about Peacock's gym MMA team was this and that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
There's that nonsense out there, but so it was at that point that left Peacocks, started going, and we were training at TKO Gym. Yeah, under with Johnny Ings and all of that lot. And then that's where prize fighters came in. Do you see what I mean? That's where this the change of title came in. Do you see what I mean? And then round about this time as well, like Suleiman had he'd gone and got his nose rebuilt, which was the worst thing you want to do when you're fighting. Which because as soon as you get it rebuilt, the bloody thing keeps like splitting. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So from that, it was a case of Suleiman came into the coaching as well, and then it's a weird one, Ahmed, because what I was doing was while I was out there coaching, you had guys from all over the place coming to see you, and we coaching. You've got this thing where you'll always sit with people and help them through their lives. It's just a natural thing. You'd sit down, people speak to you, So at that time, I had a bunch of Kurdish guys that were coming to see me. They were training with me and stuff. And they'd sit there and you'd speak to them about life. It starts off with simple things, isn't it? Diet, relationship advice, everything else. And then they started inviting me down to London, to Baker Street, where you had those first shisha cafes. So like where the Middle Eastern. So this is where you've got like what would be understood as like the Middle Eastern Albanian, that what's called like the diaspora communities. But so I started getting invited down there, and then one day I get invited down there, and there's like rows of seats. And so I've been brought in to do a public talk for all of these. All of this, like, and the community is like, it's all, well, now I know, but it's all quite hardcore gangster, like proper. You're talking about, it's different. It's a different thing, Yeah. And
but what did they bring you to talk about?
Well, this is the thing. I think the thing that I think I should have put across to start with is that's my sheikh with the green turban behind me in that picture. There. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So what happened was, for me, it was always this thing about not about religion, but about understanding. So I've always been like a student of trying to learn about that self-betterment. Do you understand what I mean? Because one thing I think that happened was that we watched a lot of our crew around us go head on into this like criminality. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And for ourselves, because we'd come from a hard background since we were young, there's nothing sensational about it. Do you understand what I mean? There's nothing like heroic about it or like brave about it. But also because of this thing of like the like I told you, like one of our boys got into that when Spike Lee did that Malcolm X film. Our boys got into it, and then I went and found a student at Malcolm X, and like it was just that journey. So what ended up happening was with these guys, it was a case of you're going and sitting with them and speaking to them about things that are now fashionable, aren't they? Like mindfulness and understanding the present state, but also like this concept of what's called like moral truth. And so, like the idea of like that you're part of your environment around you. Which can sound quite strange, but you got to remember, like these guys were living a lifestyle that, even with the way that I'd grown up, was shocking to me. And I'll give you an example of this. That one of the boys, he took me to the side and he goes, "Oh, can I sit down with you?" And I was like, "Okay." Obviously, he's upset, and he sat down and he goes, "Oh, yeah, there's something that's been doing my head in." And I go to him, "Oh, what happened? And he goes, we killed an old man last night. And I was shocked, like straight away. It was like, I'd had no like pre-warning that murders were going on around this whole situation. Yeah. But he goes, no, that's not the problem. He goes, the guy deserved it. He goes, what's bothering him is when he was stabbing the guy in the stomach, the guy was asking for his mum. Okay. That the old man was asking for his mum.
Yeah.
And then and it was strange because I looked around the room and I thought to myself, because before that moment, I was sat in that room like the fighter, like, anyone. But then I look around the room and I realized, now this is so what would now be called Kurdish mafia. So these guys were like killing Turks in North London. And then you had like Albanian brothers there and everything else. And all of a sudden it got into this thing of like, just naturally where you're helping people. And you know what? A lot of these people left what they were doing to the point where a reputation ended up in that community, because people didn't know my name back in those days. It wasn't like they didn't know me as Usman. They knew me as Axe, which is from Achi.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So everyone would call me Achi or Axe, just the brother.
It's interesting though, just the fact of, because for me, I've trained with people, and it's funny, you know, like some of the people that have trained me, like, you know, I've got a friend of mine, Jordan Hackett, and we made a joke at one point, and I said, this is more of therapy than it is training, because you go there and you've got the relationship with your coach that, you know, you go there and you're training and you're sharing what's been going on, what's been upsetting you, what's been frustrating you, what's taking your mind, what's been doing this. But the fact that these guys were so impacted by you that when they're training with you and talking to you, they were like, listen, these conversations are so great with us. We want you to come and talk to the rest of our people. Like, was that the first time that had kind of happened, that you kind of realized the impact you were beginning to have with people, not just on a level of as a trainer, but also even in the community and even from a religious aspect as well?
But you know what it is? It's like, because of the fact that pre this happening, I'd been moving around with a guy who was a student of Malcolm X, and we've been doing so he was in like university talks, and I'd be there. It was just a natural thing where you'd be like the warm-up guy in a sense. Do you see what I mean? But then with this thing, it was just something like it was something natural, but the difference with this was real. There was a reality within this where you're dealing with people who are coming from backgrounds, Ahmed, that shocked me. Like, one of the guys I was sat with, he'd lost his sister in one of Ayatollah Khomeini's concentration camps.
Okay.
And you got to remember the work that I've done since at like a high level. I've gone around and asked people, did you know about those concentration camps in Iran? They go, no, people don't even know about it. And you're listening and you're thinking to yourself, like, you know, when you see people, it's like people make a judgment, but the thing is, it's like what people want is dignity. And if you don't recognize that dignity, something else is going to come back. But the point you were making there, what happened with this was it makes you go, when you're dealing with people's issues, you're also dealing with yourself. Do you understand what I mean? So it was a case where it got into this thing where you're coming in and having to understand yourself and how you're thinking, why you're thinking like that. And this is where I got approached by Matt. So while I've been doing this stuff, I get approached by this guy who's writing for a magazine called Q News. And he goes, can I interview you about your work in this community? Do you see what I mean? He comes and interviews me.
Yeah.
So do you see what I mean? It's like it's had such an impact that from these guys, it's gone out to like this middle class of is what I'd call him. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's like, so this guy comes along, he interviews me, and then he asks me to do a talk on at this place called Friend's House. Which was, and he asked me to do a talk up there about Fatawa, which is like this, like the Islamic Samurai code in a sense. So literally, the stuff that if you went to Dagestan, Chechnya, like the stuff that Khabib's grandfather would have because Khabib's grandfather used to move with Imam Shamil. And so that code was something that was so universally used to be something that was taught to the youth. Do you see what I mean? Or like it's part of like the way you think that. So within that, like wrestling, horse riding, archery was something that was ritualized, but it was also like understanding from a point of view like a present state. So this was the stuff this was stuff that my teacher had taught me over the years. Do you see what I mean? And so
but when you say your teacher, who are you referring to?
Oh, Sheikh Ali.
Okay.
So what had happened with this is, you remember, I'm a very skeptical guy. So this can sound odd because it can sound like someone who's reached out for belonging through religion. It wasn't about that. It's like my connection with like humanity was like the brotherhood of the training, so to speak. You connect with people. So it's like the thing that I found with the teaching was that it's a teaching that's about that oneness, isn't it? Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So what I did is that I went out and looked for that teacher that had that unbroken chain and that oral tradition where he could bring that proper teaching, bring that bring that understanding, and that's where it started from the point of view of going into, because you remember we were like, well, when I say like street level, like that ghetto level, you're there. I always say, like you're dealing with people in that the forgotten people at the gutter level, the voiceless. But then what happened is, after I did this thing, this is when I got introduced to this, like, and I still call it now. You'll see, like the industry. Do you see what I mean? Like this, like, I did that talk, and then I got introduced to this, like, what I call this counter-terrorism industry or counter-extremism industry. Do you see what I mean? So, and that's when that shift happened more from the level of, okay, I'm still 24/7 on my training. I'm still doing a little, but the coaching starts to take a bit more, like a bit more of a back step. It's put a bit more to the back, and Suleiman takes over now. Do you see what I mean? Like that full time.
So listen, you just mentioned it, so I think it's a perfect segue. Like, I was almost like confused in my head when I was reading about you. I almost felt like maybe I looked up the wrong person. I was like, I've mixed up these two different Usman Rajas, because there's one of these Usman Rajas that is like part of this MMA team and all of these things, and then there's another one that's doing a lot of this counter-terrorism work to like kind of reintroduce people with like checkered past and stuff like that, to kind of reintroduce them back into society through using MMA. I almost felt like maybe there were two Usman Rajas, and then I realized that it was all you. So it's like, you touched on it slightly, but could you just explain, like, how did you transition, and what was the first kind of catalyst to make you want to transition into doing that? What made you even think that that would work? Because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of money, a lot of government, the government has spent a lot of money to try and come up with a lot of strange and unusual ideas of how to deal with maybe counter-terrorism and what a lot of people call de-radicalization and things like that. So what got you into doing that, and what made you think that MMA would be the avenue that would work?
No, well, what happened with this is it's like I ended up like, for a short time, I ended up in a think tank. Yeah. So I was at this at this think tank place, and I realized that most of the people there, like 99% of the people there, didn't have a clue, and they weren't coming from where these guys were coming from. So it was so I was very quick to step out of that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Very quick. Okay. But then what happens is that there was there's a big prison release, like the big so the first big terrorist release was a guy called Yassin Nasari, yeah? And Yassin goes, he said to the system, he goes, look, I don't want to, I'm not going to work with any of these sellouts, yeah? Like that's that's a blatantly goes, look, you got a bunch of Uncle Toms that are they're taking the money from bleeding the community, yeah? So he's the one who turned around to them and he goes, look, there's a guy out there called Usman Raja. Yeah. Go and find him. So I get this phone call from probation.
Yeah.
And they ring me up and they go, look, we got this guy. Can we bring you in? And remember, they'd already done their homework. Because I'd spoken to some researchers and all of this stuff, yeah? So they'd already done their homework. So, and the funny thing with Yassin was, the reason he knew about us was because the older generation from him used to come to us to train.
Okay.
What I'm saying? So I'm talking about the guys that you got to remember back in those days, like you had the Afghan conflict, Bosnia and Chechnya. So the guys that went out to Chechnya were coming to us to train. But you got to remember, this isn't. See, people get confused because so were you guys training terrorists? No, they weren't. They weren't known that this wasn't terrorism back in those days. These were like guys that were fighting oppression in Russia. Do you see what in Chechnya? Yeah. Now, what happens is I go in and see Yassin, and Yassin goes to me, can we, like, obviously to him, it's like, can we do a bit of training as well while we're, and I'm like, okay, cool. Because the guys at the mosque, this is the thing, because we're from the community, the guys at the mosque had a boxing gym at the top of West Ealing Mosque, and they know us. He just threw me the keys. So I was like, okay, wicked. Yeah. So the great thing with this was, it was like, we'd do a bit of training, we'd have a chat, we'd talk. And what it allows you to do is, as soon as, if you're coming to me and you're saying to me, look, I want to learn. It's like the physicality and the cognitive are connected. I gave someone an analogy today where I said to him, okay, look, you could be in a bad mood and you could even be breathing and it could be hurting. So I'm actually using an example of someone who was complaining that they were stressed and that they had a bit of pain in their chest. And then in the gym, we just sent them to get a massage, and it was a knot in their back. It was just a knot. But the knot had given them anxiety. It made them feel like they were going to die of a heart attack. But this is the thing. It's like the physicality and the thinking are connected. So what ends up happening is, if you volunteer yourself to learn something, you volunteered yourself to learn. So then I can sit down with you.
I'm interested, though. Like, take that guy as an example. So was he forthcoming in the first place? Because what like, if this was like an Instagram post, the headline would be, and I'm sure you've seen things like this, like, Usman Raja coaches terrorists and does all of these things and whatnot. So when you were dealing with these people, were they forthcoming from the jump and were like, listen, like, I wanna try and change my ways? Or
but the thing with this is what happens with this is someone can be angry about something, but then it's like it's the insanity of this is where they go with that. Like, how are you gonna? So if you've got a concern, how do you deal with that concern? And the problem you get here is that instead of people understanding that you've got your circle of influence, where if you work your way out, like the understanding is that do the best in your circle of influence. Like, so do the best in what's around you, and eventually it'll work its way out to what you're concerned about as well. You see what I mean? Now, what happens with this is, of course, they're forthcoming, but then when you sit down with them and explain to them, well, actually, the way you're interpreting this isn't a traditional way of interpreting. That the traditional way of interpretation is if you cut your finger, you bleed. If you cut down all the trees on the planet, you suffocate to death. So where's your map? That you can't start like thinking that you can cut. Like, one of the analogies with this was, if you cut down a tree, what are you going to replace it with? Do you see what I mean? Because this like idea of I'm going to go kill them. Who's them? There is no them.
So this is what I went onto your YouTube channel, and there were stories of so many people that you had worked with. And that was a common theme between every single person. Every single person kept on speaking about this anger that they had inside of them, this us versus them mentality. And they were like, every single person without fail mentioned that, like, that was one of the biggest things that Usman was showing me. He was showing me, like, it's not us against them. Like, it's this us against them mentality is unfounded, and this is not the way to go. And that is what really, I think, changed a lot of people's thinking. And when they realize that this is not us against them, this is like, you know, like, these are not people that's coming to get them and whatnot, and they can be part of this community and they can do things within this community. That was really the changing point.
Yeah, well, the thing with this is, it's like when you come up to someone, you say to them, well, actually, look, if Islam, that traditional Islam, like, remember I said to you about, look, what is it, AKA, what do you see with Cormier and Khabib? Brother, because that's what Islam brings, is that relational. It's not about like religion where you're part of a separate thing. It's connecting. It's allowing you to have like what you're looking for, which is to connect. Do you understand? Now, the thing that happens with this now is that over a lot. So when that was like back in 2008. So from 2008 to 2016, I had my clearance. I just started going into prisons, just like, and seeing people, and it was like doing 95% of the work for free. So that's why. So we could like go out there and demonstrate. And I was getting letters from guys. Do you see what I mean? I can show.
So how's that? So how does that process come about? Do you like contact? Do you contact the prisons and do you say, listen, I know you've got this person, I feel like I can help? Or are you contacting the people directly? How does that work?
Happen. I'm not contacting no one. I'm getting contacted.
Okay.
What I mean? Now, what's ended up happening with that is slowly, we got out there, and it wasn't. The MMA was the thing that was one aspect that was used with, and what that's like a holistic aspect, because now you're going right into the tradition, because like what people might call people have now discovered that like wrestling style thing now. But that's been back. This goes back 1,400 years. That tradition's there, rock solid within in Islam, ain't it? Do you see what I mean? So what ended up happening with it was that with certain people, the MMA was it was that natural connector. Because remember, in prison, especially in that period, you had this like neo-Nazi Muslim thing going on, which started in I think it started in Full Sutton and it spread across. Yeah. So you had like a lot of dispersal going on. So a lot of the brothers were like, they fight over here, then they get dispersed over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what ended up happening was when those guys were coming out, no one would want to touch anyone. Yeah. No one would want to go near these guys. And I'd say, I'd take these guys, take them down the gym, and a lot of the time they were validating themselves by being prison tough.
Yeah.
And when you take them into the gym, it allows them to see, okay, there's another level.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? But not from this like egotistical thing, but from that aspect of, okay, that other level is also developed through calm. It's developed through a methodology of like, be like the tree. When the wind blows, it moves. But if you try and push it, it stands straight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So that like, so over the years with that, it just like, it's just a natural thing where people started coming, but then also, with this thing, it's been a case of, we've been in insane situations with this thing. Yeah, we've stopped like 3 plots over the last 10 years. We've dealt with insanity, but you know what? Part of that insanity has been the way the government's dealt with it.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? The way that it's like targeted communities. And if you look at, I've always been like the biggest critic of like Prevent and all of that stuff, always since the beginning.
Yeah.
But the thing that I've realized with this is that, people look at everything as a moneymaker, right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Because I know at one point you were having a real good amount of success doing that. And I believe you and your wife started an organization. Now, obviously, I don't know how much you can talk on that, whether you can talk about that at all. But what was the thought process behind kind of making that into something official and going that path? Because it's one thing for people to call you and then say, Usman, can you talk to this person and whatnot? It's another thing making it, because it's a big step to say, all right, cool, we're going to make this official. We're going to put this out there, because there's a lot of people that might not understand what you're doing and see an organization like that and feel like maybe you might be doing something negative and might try and put a negative twist on what you're doing. Yeah. So what was the thought process between you and your wife actually making that an organization?
Because what you do is, when you can demonstrate that you can go out there and people can be changed, because what you're doing is you're educating. Do you understand what I mean? Because it's about behavioral understanding. If someone's reacting, it's because they're understanding things in a wrong way. But you got to teach someone how to critically think. Do you see what I mean? Now, the reason we never worried about people coming and saying whatever they want to say is because you got to remember, all of the boys are still with us. All of the boys that changed, and even like guys that were like the head of all the Muslim gang at Belmarsh, for example, he's still with us. All of these people are still with us. This has never been, it's like where we come from is a completely different place. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But the point with this was, it was a case of, okay, go out there and literally bring that love. It sounds weird, you bring that love. Do you understand? And that's why it's like you can't question it. You can't question the results, because this wasn't done from a pretend point of view. Evidence speaks for itself, doesn't it? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, like so I would say, for anybody, like, if you get the opportunity, go onto Usman's YouTube page, because there's some really good testimonials on there and just examples of some of the work that he's done. And it's super interesting, because even there's I apologize, I've forgotten what the brother's name, but I remember that there was a brother that was doing the Muslim patrol, that the brother that was involved in that. And to see the turnaround that he was able to do, like, it's incredible. And I think that's a great testament to the work you're doing, because that the video on your page shows where he began and where he was at, understanding how wrong that was, and really becoming a contributing member of society, and being able to influence and inspire more people to make better decisions and turn things around the way that he did. So it was really good to see. So,
you know, that the thing is that the methodology itself isn't like, it's a human thing. And this is what we're doing now with this, which is like, the idea was always like, okay, look, there was a situation here that we needed to deal with. And we demonstrated a way to deal with it. But what we realized with it is that people want to come in and they want to take what you're doing and sell it. And we were like, no, we're not part of it. That's why we left all of that government stuff. So now what we're doing with it is exactly what we were going to do originally, which is bring it to the people, bring it to everyone. Which is, that's why like that's why we got a podcast that we're running. We got like with a colleague of mine called or brother of mine called Majid Nawaz, who himself went to Egyptian prison, had his own little, Majid had his own little journey with like, where in between he was part of like the system, but then like saw the weakness in it, but also like this through searching found like sitting with Sheikh Ali and learning the proper thing, and that's where you saw Majid over like the last few years come out and start battling the system in that proper way. Do you see what I mean? So this has always been about like, truth is not just because everyone around you agrees with something doesn't mean what they believe is true. The idea of even like rational means that you have the tools to measure the reality around you. But really, most people live in a state of psychosis. But because what's happening is they're in like a delusional state of the reality around them. Like, and that's what we were talking about. Like, what affects people nowadays? Anxiety, stress. You see what I mean? Lack of confidence, lack of community.
So you talking about that as well, it reminded me as well. We were talking before we started the interview, we were talking about I don't know what you called it, pastoral. Was it? We were talking about pastoral care. So can you because we were touched on it briefly off camera, but can you just break down for me, what is pastoral care? What is it in relation to, and why is it important?
Okay, so what we're talking about here is like behavioral understanding. So where we're coming from with this is an actual behavioral understanding model of things. Do you see what I mean? So if you look at the way people think, it's like you're living in a state where Schopenhauer called it consistent pessimism, where you're always living for a time in the future, never now. So you're in a state of imagination. So if you look at it, you're depressed about what's happening, what happened in the past, but what happened in the past makes you depressed about what's going to happen in the future, but you're never now. Like even the good things that are happening around you, you miss them. They just fly past you. So what we're talking about with this is actually teaching people to be now, to even like be in the reality around them and connect with the reality around them. But also when you're looking at it from a practical perspective, Let's get real with this and go to an understanding of what a flow state is as well. So like, we know we're training, and we've always implemented this with the idea that 1,000 repetitions builds a neurological pathway. Yeah. So if you learn to do something 1,000 times, but the point is, when you're fighting, you're not doing it consciously. Anyone that understands the way that the brain works understands that even me, like picking up this bottle, I can give you an excuse to why I've picked up the bottle. But if you see the impulses in the brain, you're going to go, okay, there's what's called post-event rationalization, meaning I've picked it up and I'm giving an example. I'm giving an excuse for why I've picked it up. But that's after the event. So the movement itself is something that's coming from a subconscious level. Now, this has been understood in the East for a very, very long time, because the collective understanding is very different, where language is used as a symbol. Yeah.
Okay.
So what you get is like when you're applying that from a therapeutic perspective or from an understanding perspective, you basically get into nurturing the individual and allowing them to think and in a healthy way, to be mindful and well. Do you understand?
But is this in regards to is this in regards to like fighters, or is this just in general everyday life, or is this specific to sport?
Now, the fighting aspect with this is it's very, very important, because when you're talking about why do people break down, if anyone who knows properly about fighting, who's been in the game for a long time, you'll be able to see when someone's in a flow state and when someone's got mentally exhausted. You see that when you're watching a fight. Now, the point is with this is like, if the person's functioning properly, they're functioning from a response perspective. A good example of this would be Roy Jones in his early days. He's not thinking about what he's doing; he's responding. Or if you want to go from another point with this, is there's a wisdom there where too much sparring is bad for you, and really it's better to get a certain level of repetition done where you're just able to respond. And we've seen this logic now being employed by people like Max Holloway, and previous to that, you see Joe Calzaghe talking about it. But when you get into the psychological aspect with this, it's actually, okay, how do you get away from thinking too much? How can you how can you stop yourself getting teleported back into the middle of the ring, thinking about whether this is going to happen or that's going to happen? Because what happens is, as soon as, remember we talked about, as soon as that glycogen burns out, as soon as fatigue kicks in, then reality kicks in. That's when things start hurting, don't they? Do you see what I mean?
It's interesting. You spoke about this, and it's fascinating for me personally, because I think, as I said in the beginning, I had an opportunity to kind of face one of the fighters that came under your banner. And it was interesting for me because I don't think I had a realistic concept of what I was getting myself into. I had watched a lot of movies. I had seen fights online, and I remembered a lot of the things that they did. I remember walking out and thinking, all right, cool. On TV, I've seen fighters put their arms out and slap hands with people in the crowd, so I should do that. And then I thought, I've seen people scream, so I should also do that. And then when I got into the ring, I said, I'm going to screw face this guy and I'm going to intimidate him and he will be scared. And the gentleman was David Zoltazek. And as you know him and are familiar with him, do you think he was scared and intimidated when I gave him my angry face? He was not one bit. And then the reality of the situation when the fight got going really kicked in. And it's a scary moment when the reality of the situation hits you, because he understood that he was in a fight. He's not there thinking and saying I should do. He was in such a flow state. He was reacting to everything that was going on. And I was in a moment of not understanding the gravity of what a mixed martial arts fight is. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about that because I've experienced it firsthand.
Yeah, because I always say to people, I go, look, when you're training, you got to, the way I say is you got to develop that dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I always say is I go, look, if you scare me, I'm a civilized guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to scare me and I'm going to be like, whoa. And then I'm going to like retreat and then the dog's going to come out. And I don't have to worry because my eyes, like, even when I'm looking at you changes, because it's not eye contact anymore, is it? It's like you're objectified and I've got to dismantle you. But that dismantling isn't happening on a conscious level because it's like I've just run off. The thing that you've let out is something that's been, there's a term for this, like operant conditioning, where you're repeating. And it's interesting with this because there's people be able to see this even if they look and study that. Like I was having this conversation with my brother and bloody wrestling coach Lubo Kumbrov. Do you see what I mean? Okay. And Lubo's like he's a legend, like wrestling master, and like we're training, and Lubo was explaining to me about how, because we've got this like. Well, you know, Ahmed, the Zikr breathing training that you do, yeah? So
yeah.
So that Zikr training actually teaches you how to like breathe during the fight, because it's like there's that short breath, long breath going on, yeah? So it teaches you how to breathe when you're wrestling. But also the Zikr training through the repetition takes you into like a now state. A B state, and this is what people look and they go, oh, they're seeing all of this like impact of the Muslim fighters now, aren't they? Where they're seeing like Khabib, or they're seeing like Islam Makhachev, and even like the mindset that you see with Hamza. Do you see what I mean? But Hamza's coming from that Chechen background, But the point is, it's like this thing's been that science has been there for like 1400 years and what I realized with this stuff is it's like it's universal. That's a human thing. Like we got, one of the things that I was doing with the boys yesterday training is like, okay, we're at the end of the training session, and one of the things you get them to do is lie down and take deep breaths, and they're like, okay, and to oxygenate and relax. But the point is, it's like getting guys to learn that if you rely upon yourself, there's going to be a problem because you're like role playing to yourself. Do you understand what I'm on about? You're trying to show yourself that you're
elaborate on that for me. Elaborate on that for me.
Example, like you're like what you just said to me, where you're clapping hands with the crowd, where you're where you're going to look, but you're doing that to convince yourself as well, aren't you?
Now I understand.
I'm like, you can be as hyped as you want because I'm not hyped. I've got to like be calm. Because like when you get hit, if that thing's rigid, it's going to break. And you learn this over the years. You realize that you never get yourself. You're never going to be in the fight with like fresh energy. It's always going to be first minute you're going to be straight into that like sprint breathing. You see what I mean? So you got to learn to make that your friend. And how do you do that? By not having to rely upon your mind, but rely upon just being able to respond. And that's the science part of this. Do you see what I mean? Everything, the body and mind are connected, aren't they? I think that's the thing that's lost. I think one of the things we were saying there about MMA, I saw it go from, like, you remember we had Night of the Samurai to us lot at the Henley Royal Regatta fighting in a ring with a bucking bronco at the side of the ring with rich people drunk. And I remember being there thinking, and me and Zikix warming up in the back of a truck.
Yeah.
And me thinking to myself, what is it like? Is this like this sport that we're doing that we respect? And yeah, we're thinking of ourselves like modern samurai thing, yeah?
Yeah.
But you're seeing it being turned into something silly, and then even to a point where Rico Rodriguez, who was like a UFC champion.
UFC heavyweight champion.
And Rico's and I see Rico I come training in the evening, and Rico's there with Reedy, and Rico's fighting on a UK show, and I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, like, there wasn't in the early days that level of the fighter not having there wasn't much respect there for it. Do you see what? And it had that thing where, because we were always treating it as something serious. That sweatsuit on, you're running 7 miles 3 times a week. Yeah, you're having to travel like bloody 40 miles on a train, get into the gym, spa, sleeping on the couch at the front of Peacocks. Do you see what I mean? But it was all a privilege. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
So I'm mindful of time right now, but what I want to try and do is that I want to try and close this out by asking you, like, just finally. So we've spoken about like how you began. We spoke about your counterterrorism work. We spoke about pastoral care. Right now, what is your focus on at the moment, if you can talk about it? Because I know you've got a lot of things in the work, but what can you tell us that you're up to at the minute? And anyone that wants to try and get in touch with you and reach out to you and be a part of whatever you've got going on, how do they do that? 2-part question.
Okay. What we got going on right now is it's bringing, previous this, it was almost like we've evidenced the fact that here's an understanding of reality. So basically, like, from a perspective of helping communities, helping people, because you got to remember, I've been like keynote speaker at West Point Military Academy. I've trained LAPD, FBI, but the point with this is it was then bringing that science, that understanding, and also from a concept of that reality, because now we've got it where they call it the post-truth, that the time of post-truth now, where you've got like an example of this is you've got the wokeism on one side, and then in reaction to the wokeism, you've got all this self-help stuff going on. Yeah. But what we're doing now is we got a podcast going on called Warrior Creed, which is on Getter. Yeah.
Okay.
Where we've got into
because I was gonna say that's what I was gonna ask as well. I was gonna say, how do we find the podcast? How do we watch the podcast?
Okay, so we were the podcast itself, something that we're doing specifically on that platform Getter. So it's like you go on to Getter, you it's basically like it's free. You sign up and then you just come on and we're the podcast's on there. We stream it. Currently, we're streaming it on the Friday, but I think we're going to be shifting that day around because we've been asked by viewers in the US to bring it earlier into the week. Do you see what I mean? US audience, isn't it, as well? So we But what we're doing with that is we're not talking about, this isn't just like that normal podcast. I mean, we've had like some of the top academics on there. Do you see what I mean? As well. So it goes through, it really does hit the topics of the time, but on a proper level. Do you see what I mean? But also from a point of view of not getting stuck in just what I call the Eurocentric understanding, because people tend to forget this is only like the idea of philosophy that people keep talking about is only 12% of the planet. So when you start opening it up, people will see it on the podcast. You've got guys that have written multiple books that are going, oh, I never knew that. And you're like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You got to remember, I realized all of this when I was doing a doctorate, and I realized the supervisors around me, they didn't even have like so the stuff that we wanted to get into, they didn't have the prerequisite knowledge for us to even get into it. That's how shocking it is. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So,
but listen, man, I feel like we need to have a discussion like this again, because I feel like there was so much that we touched on, which was amazing, but I feel like there's so much more we could touch upon. I feel like as well, for everyone, the podcast that you guys have got going on, I feel like it's important for people to watch, because there are certain things that maybe we might not have had time to touch upon here, and information and knowledge that you might be dropping for people over there. So please, anyone, if you get the opportunity, go onto the Getter platform, and the podcast is called, you said, Warrior Creed, yeah?
Yeah. So Warrior Creed, and then go on there, and it's like the Getter structures, like for people that don't know, it was set up because a lot of people started getting banned on Twitter and stuff like that. So on so a lot of the people that like Andrew Tate and people like that, they moved on to that platform. Do you see what I mean? So but the great
long live the top G, just saying.
The great thing there is we're able to like put things out there now which they haven't been discussed, or people don't even know about. And this is the problem right now. That really we live in a time where people are crippled by what I call general knowledge. Yeah, you think you know, but you don't know. It's like you end up as a slave. That's how you get manipulated.
So basically, the platform and the podcast is basically a place where you can have open dialogue without the censorship, the extreme censorship that seems to be going on at the moment. Yeah.
So and the other thing with this is it's an informed opinion. Now you got to remember, like Majid, when he was on Joe Rogan, for example, it's the way Majid broke things down on there. It's like people are still coming out with it and going, "Oh, he said that then, now, and it's happening now." Do you understand what I mean? And that comes from a level of like experience where, on Majid's side, he was sitting with prime ministers and presidents. On my side of things, I was literally dealing with stuff that, like the guy, like the Kevin from ESPN said to me, he goes like, he's only read about that stuff in James Bond novels. And I said to him, look, in those novels, it's exciting. When you're dealing with it from a reality perspective, this isn't, it's a nightmare, because what you're seeing is that human beings are being, literally human beings are being used like pawns to create industries. And you see that stuff now, don't you?
Thank you so much for having the conversation, for taking the time out with us. You spoke to us about so many different topics about you and the things that you've been doing, the people that you've been helping. And then obviously you let us know about the podcast on the Getter platform, which is fantastic for people to know about.
And watch this space as well, because we're going to be, I don't want to ruin I don't want to ruin the surprise until the surprise comes, ain't it? Do you see what I mean? So,
but we'll just let people know, definitely on the MMA TV platform. Just be aware and keep your eyes ready for some stuff to be coming in the future. We're definitely going to get some work done for sure.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, listen, Usman, assalamu alaikum. We appreciate you, and I look forward to doing this again.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.